Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I'm Tahir Kılavuz. I'm the coordinator of İSAR Research Center. I would like to welcome you all for this day-long symposium on classical Islamic texts and contemporary psychology. We are really happy to have you all, and we will have a good symposium for the day. So, So in starting, I would like to give you a brief overview of the İSAR and İSAR Research Center, and I will try to connect it to this symposium for the day, and I will hopefully leave the floor to Ustad Human and Ustad Tuba. So since its foundation for about 15 years ago, İSAR has been focusing on education and research on Islamic sciences, social sciences, and humanities. So the main aim is to bring together the classical Islamic sciences and basically contemporary social sciences and humanities. So we have a 4-year-long education program, mainly for the undergraduate and for some graduate students as an extracurricular activity. Where students are taking about 15 to 20 hours of courses throughout the week on top of their university education, where they are taught in classical Islamic sciences, starting with the auxiliary sciences like Sarf and Nahu and Mantiq and Balagha, and then continuing on the main Islamic sciences such as fiqh, hadith, tafsir, kalam, usul, etc. And then they're also taking courses on several social sciences and humanities. And finishing this 4-year program, they are moving to an advanced studies where we are coordinating under the İSAR Research Center. So just like in the education part, the İSAR Research Center aims to bring together research on Islamic sciences, social sciences, and humanities. For that, we have like several working groups and several like tracks of activities, including medicine and Islamic ethics, economics, law, and fiqh, psychology and Islamic sciences, as well as, for example, computational social science and Islamic texts. So in each of these, we are doing research like primarily on Islamic sciences and sometimes primarily on social sciences and humanities. But the ultimate aim is to bring together these two parts. We are trying to do something in the intersection of these two areas. So when we think of the pre-modern ulama, Islamic sciences and social sciences and humanities were not necessarily separate from each other. Ibn Sina was not just an alim of Islamic sciences. So medicine was of his interest as much as Islamic sciences. For Ghazali, along with Islamic sciences, many social sciences and humanities fields were his interest, including psychology. For Ibn Khaldun, history and sociology, in today's words, were not necessarily separate from Islamic sciences. But in our modern world, in our modern academia, obviously with the advances in knowledge, we have a separation between these fields. And one of these biggest separations has been seen in the area of religion and social sciences and humanities. So this is why we are trying to bring religion and primarily Islamic sciences with contemporary social sciences and humanities in İSAR Research Center. And our working group on psychology and Islamic sciences has been a great contribution to our activities on that sense. Ustad Human is going to give you a broader view of what they have been doing so far. But for the last year and a half, they have been doing a great job on trying to understand the Islamic texts from the perspective of contemporary psychology. And this symposium has been one of the great outcomes of their endeavor. And I hope this symposium will be a good start, or let's say a good step on producing many great works, many great outcomes from this research. Once again, I would like to welcome you all for this day-long symposium, and I would like to thank to our partners in crime, Khalil Center and EDEP, for organizing this symposium. And I would also like to thank for our great organizers, led by Ustaz Human. They have worked tirelessly in the last couple of days and weeks, actually. And I hope at the end of the day, we will really enjoy what they have been putting together in the last couple of days. And I hope you enjoy and we all benefit from this symposium. Welcome again.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to welcome you all to İSAR. This is the main building. My office is located at the Uzbeki Tekke or Khanqa Zawiya, which is up the hill on the other side. And inshallah afterwards, some of you may be able to go and see that destination, inshallah. And EDEP, which is down the road, which is the girls, the women's, madrasa or academy for Islamic sciences, and İSAR, this is the main building for İSAR. Just so you're also situated to know where things are, because we are having parallel sessions. So on the sheet that you have, you'll see that it'll be listed. EDEP is where something is located, and İSAR, and they're walking distance of one another, and there's another conference room like this at EDEP, so just don't be confused by that. And the volunteers are here to assist you and help direct you if you get lost. Just to pick up on what Dr. Tahir was saying, Jazakumullah khair, first of all, on behalf of İSAR, we welcome you, and as well as my special gratitude to the both of you on my right and left, who have really supported this endeavor and have really welcomed it and have opened your arms to this type of project. I think we're all sort of on the same page in recognizing that the Muslims have inherited some colonial problems. And those are the problems of the Western world that had created these false dichotomies between the sacred sciences and religious sciences, sacred and secular or academic kind of worldly sciences. And they had this clash, and so at some point there was a necessity for that separation, which never occurred in the Muslim world except on the back of colonialism, when we ended up inheriting these problems. And so as a result of being inheritors of those problems, we've also had then reductionistic training oftentimes. We've been forced into separation of people who are in religious studies and people who are exclusively in social sciences, physical sciences, and the other academic sciences. And so we want to break this sort of arrangement and dichotomy. And what better way to do so than to look to the past of the giants of our tradition of scholarship to see what they've done. And certainly we notice that many of our great scholars were well versed in many sciences. They certainly had a primary vocation or specialization that they would be known for, but they had the capacity to be able to bring in and bridge, knowledge from other disciplines as well. And which discipline do we want to lay emphasis to is that I think it was a basic foundation that everybody got a religious education once upon a time. And at İSAR and EDEP, they do that, right? And that's the goal, is to say that you can be a psychologist, you can be a sociologist, you can be a philosopher, you can be a physician, but make sure you have a foundation in the Islamic sciences, because it will teach you how to think. It will teach you how to appropriate that knowledge, and it will teach you how to turn that knowledge into a spiritual practice, into an ibadah, and to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than disconnect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's the goal, and it's a very tall order for many of these students that are here. They spend the mornings in their universities and they grill them from İSAR and Edep as well, making sure that they get the highest of grades, right, in their undergraduate programs. And then they come here and then they have high expectations that you go through a syllabus, a traditional syllabus of the Turath, right, of the books and traditions, hadith, Quran, tafsir, fiqh, etc., to get that foundation. So they're spending morning till evening, most of the days of the week, really trying to develop themselves. And mashallah, I can say personally, after coming here and working with these students, it's been an incredible opportunity for me to be with these students. It's almost like the students have been prepared to do this work. Like the human resources to do this research is already sort of made available for us. Because this was part of my dream, actually, that I would have envisioned that we have individuals who have foundations in the Islamic sciences to be able to speak to psychology. When we talk about Islamic psychology, it's an intersectional field. Islam and psychology, it's intersectional. So it requires us to be able to look at the Islamic studies, Tibbi tradition, where when we say Islam has a lot to offer, right, the modern world. Islam and Islamic civilization and Islamic scholarly tradition has a lot to offer the field of psychology. It's a bold claim. It's a big claim, right? We're saying in a world in which there's hundreds of thousands of publications on psychology and departments across the Western world, particularly that then transfer those same, pedagogical approaches and curriculums and syllabi to the Muslim world, we're saying Islam has something to offer to this, that people have been talking about psychology before the 1900s. And the problem is, though, when we make that claim, how are we going to back it up? We have to be able to demonstrate that. We have to be able to say, here it is. And so for many of us who have been disconnected from our own heritage and traditions, right, we're unable to access it. We're unable to access it because of language. We're unable to access it even if we learn the language, because the way that it's written and the form that it's written in is inaccessible, because we're not familiar with how the Islamic tradition works and how the Islamic scholarly tradition works. So we become handicapped. And so what we wanted to do, and we did this last year, we said, yes, we all believe that Islam has something to offer. And we heard of it in piecemeal here and there. And so what we want to do is to bring together a group of individuals to go through some of these classical texts and read them. And so that's what we did as a group. We assembled, we came together, Edeb, İSAR students together, and we opened it up to others in Istanbul on condition that they were able to read at least a basic familiarity and foundations in Islamic studies and an ability to read the texts. And then we had them come in and we assigned a reader every week, and students prepared. And then we had somebody taking notes, right, on the readings, and we had these discussions. We tried to situate Ghazali and the Ajaib al-Qalb and Riyadat sections within, the context of behavioral research, for example, on cognitive theories, right? We took, Imam Rabbani, some of his maktubat. We took Awarif al-Ma'arif of Suhrawardi, for example. We read from Birgivi, for example. We read from many, many different texts and segments that we went through, all with some relationship and chapters related to the field of psychology. From the Tibbi tradition, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, to Ibn Sina, to Razi, to the Tasawwufi traditions, to the Kalami tradition. We read pieces of commentaries of Sharh Aqaid, for example, to be able to inform us about some of these topics. And so at the end of that, we said, look, what we want to do is we should create a symposium or a conference where everybody come in and present how they can take this information away and put it into application and enrich the field of psychology with it. And initially the idea was to just do it amongst ourselves, right? We said, hey, all of you students have been doing this for this whole year. Let's get together. You guys put something together, and then we're going to create a book out of it, inshallah, and review it and really do some research on it. Then, Arif, and Emrullah, who have been kind of and Bura, who's actually in Jordan right now, and we're joking amongst ourselves. He's enjoying himself while they're tirelessly working here to put together the symposium. But he's doing what he can from there, and he had discussed it and spoke with Dr. Tahir, and İSAR said we should make this a public symposium. We should open it up, open the floor. We should let other people kind of be aware of what's happening, and then allow contributions from other individuals as well. And so they supported it. They said, let's do this. We'll open up the space for it. We'll advertise it. And we said, great. Okay, alhamdulillah. So we put it together, and here's where we are. And so we're really hoping to look at the contributions that all of you put on the table to take part in this collective initiative, right? To be able to really dig up into our turath and our traditions, to be able to then bring it out in order to be able to benefit the field, Muslims, and humanity. Jazakumullahu khair. I'll hand it over to Dr. Tuba, inshallah.
Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulina Muhammed ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecma'in. Assalamu alaikum. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you this event. As EDAP Center, we are very honored to participate this symposium and be part of it. EDAP Center is established in the year of 2014. It offers a 4-year educational program to successful female students who are studying in various departments of the university based in Istanbul. EDAP offers, during the program, EDAP offers the same education like İSAR, so I don't want to repeat it. It's very similar, but just for female. So I believe that this symposium will provide you a close examination of the Islamic tradition, its doctrinal consideration and epistemology, and understanding the epistemology allow us to rebuild the Islamic perspective, concept in modern times, which we really needed today. And I will not prolong my speech any longer. I look forward to hearing the keynote speech. Just before concluding, I would like to thank everyone who contributed this event, this symposium, especially Dr. Human and his team, and also İSAR. I would like to convey my appreciation to you. I thank you all participants most warmly for your participation. Wishing you all success with this program. I wish the program will be fruitful for everyone present here. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to give the stage the head of Dr. Muhammed Tahir Kılavuz to moderate the first session.
Okay. Welcome again. Inshallah, we'll start with the keynote speech from Professor Süleyman Derin. Tamamdır. Tamamdır. Stop. Okay. So I would like to invite Professor Süleyman Derin here for his keynote speech titled Psychological Implications from the Anecdotes of the Prophets. Süleyman Derin, Professor Süleyman Derin is a professor of Islamic sciences and particularly tasawwuf at the Faculty of Theology or İlahiyat Fakültesi at Marmara University. He's also an advisor board member for ISIP and Al-Balqi Institute. He has authored several books and articles in the field of Sufism. His research interests focus on Sufi psychology, and he hosts a radio program titled Sufism and Psychology. Some of his articles include The Self and the Other in Ibn Arabi and Rumi, and Spiritual Psychology and Al-Ghazali. I think we are quite lucky and really honored to listen Professor Süleyman Derin in his keynote speech, and I appreciate for his acceptance of our invitation. And floor is yours, Professor. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulina Muhammed ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Dear friends, dear academicians, dear students, all welcome. I am very happy to give this talk. It's not me the key speaker, the professors are the keynote speaker here. I am just narrating what I read from tafasir, from Sufi books and Islamic books. Today, really, it's very important to take our, material from the Holy Quran as well as from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Quran is a miracle from all aspects. Scientifically, it's a miracle. From the literary point of view, it's a miracle. Also, we have so many, psychological things we can borrow from the Quran. But of course, it needs really good digging, There are so many beautiful things, but we have to work very hard and make paradigms of therapies. Yusuf alayhi salam paradigm, for example. Yaqub alayhi salam therapy paradigm. But it really needs, cooperating between theologians, fuqaha, psychologists, psychiatrists, come together. How can we use these stories? So why prophets? First thing, because in Islamic tradition, prophets are ma'asum. They don't commit a sin, grave sin. If they make little mistakes, they are corrected by Allah. So we can take any prophet in the Holy Quran as our exemplar, There's no problem taking Yaqub alayhi salam as an example. If you lost your beloved children, you can say, Astagfirullah, innama ashku bathi wa huzni ila Allah. You can cry, no problem, as long as you don't complain to others. That's what Yaqub alayhi salam says. Innama ashku bathi wa huzni ila Allah. I can cry, I can open my heart to Allah, no problem with that. But if you complain, everyone, my child died very early and always complaining, that's the problem. One day a Sufi went to a doctor. The doctor in Turkey asks, what's your complaint? And the Sufi said, I have no complaint, alhamdulillah. So why did you come here, if you have no complaint? But there was someone with the Sufi, he said, doctor, don't ask him like this. Ask him, where do you have pain? If you ask me, where do you have pain? I can say, I have a pain in my knees, but alhamdulillah, I am very happy, no problem. So, it sometimes needs using a beautiful language. So in Turkey, it's like this, what's your complaint all the time? Alhamdulillah, we have no complaint. So, prophets are good examples of psychological well-being, resilience, whatever you imagine. So, we can take them as examples. They are ma'asum, and I will give you examples how prophets are corrected. Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam prayed for the destruction of his own nation because they were, really stubborn. They didn't come to Tawheed. But when his own son Kenan was drowning, he said, oh my Lord, you promised me to save my family, and look, my son is drowning there, Allah really scorned Nuh alayhi salam. He said, he's not from your family. He's, amalun ghayru salih. So Allah, corrected Nuh alayhi salam's prayer for his own son. If you, pray for the destruction of all nations, your own nation, there are children, sons and boys that other fathers have also, you should be ready to for your own son, sacrifice your own son, you know. When our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day he was talking to, Quraysh, the chieftains of the Quraysh, and Sahaba Maktum came to him to ask a question. Abasa wa tawalla an ja'ahu al-a'ma. Ibn Ajib is using these things. He says, this is a mistake between the two goods. The Prophet ﷺ didn't, talk to the Quraysh because they were rich, because they were prestigious. No, he was trying to protect the companions like Maktum, the poor companions, the slaves. So he said, maybe I can talk to this Ru'asa now, the chieftains, and change their mind and talk to you later. You're a Sahabi. I can always talk to you. But Allah didn't like this. He said, if someone is coming to you willingly, opening his heart, this is your priority. Don't go after the rich people if they are reluctant to learn about Islam. So alhamdulillah, from all kind of emotions, I call Quran as our emotional compass. Is it okay, brother? What do you think? Every emotion is mentioned in the Holy Quran. Anger, grief over loss, impatience. Sayyidina Yunus alayhi salam were impatient, left his, So there are also interesting prayers. Inshallah, today we will start Prophet Adam alayhi salam, and his prayer is very interesting. Salih alayhi salam has a lot of prayers. So we can read these prayers also in these situations, as well as, taking them as examples. So prophets are innocent, ma'soom. Why stories? Sufis use a lot of stories in their books, especially Rumi. It's a book of Mesnevi, 6 volumes, 25,000 couplets. I don't know how many stories. Now I am preparing a book, actually a Quranic tafsir, by Mevlana, compiling these stories and putting them in correct places. So relevant places. Sometimes Rumi says, go and read chapter so and so. That means this is, a commentary of this chapter. Sometimes I make my own ijtihad. I don't know whether it's good or you will see it inshallah. So Sufis love using manaqib and stories. Why? Because 1/3 of the Holy Quran are all about stories. Actually, I find this very relevant. Yesterday I told about it. We can use this for dawah tools as well. When you speak about Musa alayhi salam, we have more information about Musa alayhi salam maybe than Jews. Actually, I gave a lecture on Jesus alayhi salam. I told them there are some facts in the Holy Quran that you don't have in your Bibles. Like Isa alayhi salam talking to people when he was in the cradle. I am a prophet. So, it's also good. These therapies can be used by Christians and Jews because we have the common names. Sayyidina Yaqub, Sulaiman, all biblical prophets. Also, the researchers, a lot of tests are done on stories. Stories stay in your brain 5 times more than the facts and figures and, statistics. You don't forget. But I will tell you a different story today, Brother Human. There's no test today. Yesterday's story about this man who wants a tattoo. Today, a different story, inshallah. Because Rumi has plenty of stories almost about everything. He makes therapy through stories. If you have some, for example, kibir. One day, few students from İSAR in Ottoman times. Were you here in Ottoman times? No.
I guess not.
Okay, a similar institution. They were going to pass the other side. They rented a little boat. In those days, we had maybe big ones or small ones, garib. You could row, we pay a little amount of money. And the students were a little bit proud of their ilm al-nahu. They said, oh uncle, do you know some sarf? Oh my son, I am a illiterate man. I had never had the chance to learn and read in the madrasa. They are giggling and laughing, this guy doesn't know sarf. Because when you learn something, you think everything is all about you. You think you are doing the greatest job in the world. And after a while they said, oh uncle, do you know some grammar? Nahu? I said, oh my son, I was a illiterate boy. I didn't have a chance to study. And they said, you wasted half of your life. And they were again, laughing. After a while, there was wind and waves became, thunder. And the Karib, Sahib al-Karib, the boatman asked, do you know swimming? They all said no. Oh, you have wasted all your lives. Because the boat will go down and you will be all drowned, but alhamdulillah, I know swimming. Rumi says this is ilm al-mahu, laysa ilm al-nahu. He's always using this poetic language. Ilm al-nahu is very good, you know. Actually, alhamdulillah, I am very happy. İSAR is merging all these Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Here, alhamdulillah, you learn about Islam, Iman, also the ilm al-mahu, Rumi calls, Sufism and Tasawwuf and all these great Muslim scholars in Sufi field, alhamdulillah. And they also practice a lot of futuwa, which are the, you know, ideals of perfection. So alhamdulillah, no problem with İSAR. I'm just making a joke. So as everyone listen carefully, you know. So stories really, you don't forget. Therefore, I said stories of prophets as psychological compass. Now, if you start, inshallah, with Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. Adam alayhi salam is our father, father of all humanity. He is the first prophet, as well as he is the first sinner. You know, because he made this mistake of approaching this forbidden tree. But what did he do? He repented. When I teach Kitab al-Tawbah from Ihya Ulumuddin, I always think really very many hours how I can teach this in psychology. Tawbah, there is no, you know, translation of Tawbah in psychology, because no one make Tawbah. If people are doing something, they just go to psychologist. So as the psychologist approve it, oh, you are doing very well, you know, go ahead. You can be homosexual, no problem, it's very natural. Sometimes, isn't it, Brother Rasman? They pay you money, so as you clean their conscience. Go ahead, no problem. But in Islam, we can't do that, you know. It's really difficult to become a Muslim psychologist. Sometimes you must say, this is haram, this is halal, don't do this. But how will you do it, you know? So, inshallah, from these stories, we can take, you know, a lot of interesting things. Adam alayhi salam was the first repentant, and I said, Tawbah is change for the good. You want to, you know, complete or actualize yourself, so you must give up some minor mistakes in your life. So fill up your life with virtues. Give up the vices, raza'il, and fill it up with fada'il. So I am trying to fix, you know, in my poor psychology knowledge, how I can convey this in psychological, you know, vocabulary. Because there's no tawbah. Of course, it's easy when you speak about kibir, you can say it is, you know, narcissism. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's very difficult to find the translation of, you know, proper technology, terminology in psychology. There's a very interesting joke or story in Rumi about narcissism. One day, a mosquito find a pool of urine by a donkey in its footstep. And he found also a little bit straw. Riding the straw, the mosquito said, I don't know any better captain than me, any bigger vessel than my ship, and no big ocean than my ocean. So he's always making very funny jokes, you know, to teach you that, I mean, who are you? A piece of, you know, dirty water you are created from, sperm. So why are you boasting of your wealth, of your career, if you are a captain? No psychologist here, only, you know, captains are, so warning. So Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam is the first sinner, but first one who repented sincerely, you know, رَبِّي إِنِّي ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لِي وَتَرْحَمْنِي لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. So he sincerely accepted. I also use Adam alayhi salam to give the understanding of man's creation and nature in Islam, comparing with other, you know, traditions. Because when you look at the Holy Quran, the first discussion is about the creation of man. Chapter Baqarah, in the, you know, beginning pages, Allah is discussing and disputing with angels, with shaitan, why man is so important, why he is the Khalifa. Because everyone is, you know, objecting, oh Allah, why do you create man? I am out of fire, better worshipper, you know, with bad intention. But also angels made the mistake of objecting Allah's intention. He said, why are you creating? نَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ, we praise you. And he will shed blood. Actually, this is also a miracle of the Quran, that today when we read the news and things, people are killing each other, unfortunately. The Quran is giving about the nature of man, the evil character of man, that we love killing each other, either by eating dead flesh or really using guns and stuff. In America, people are just killing and going to small schools, with human, just shooting around. Because Allah gave the news that if you don't tame yourself, that's something that you will eventually do it. So, we find a beautiful, information about human's nature. Human is better than angels. Of course, خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين. Our nature is clean, pure, not contaminated. We don't have original sin, as in Christianity. Actually, Martin Seligman is criticizing Freud as dragging this corrupt notion of original sin into psychology. Alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we have no problem with man's nature. It's pure and clean. Of course, nature or nurture, it is the both. Actually, I find these Quranic stories, all of them, are preventing us from the psychology of victimhood. You cannot claim, I was so poor, therefore I couldn't pray. And Allah Almighty will show us our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-faqru fakhri. He was putting 2 stones into his belly sometimes out of hunger. If you say, I am too rich, I didn't have time, calculating my money and chasing up my businesses, then Sulaiman alayhi salam will come up. He was the richest man on earth, as I said yesterday. He was, commanding the angels, the jinns, not the angels, the jinns, the devils, and talking to animals. It's a very vast kingdom, more than any rich man today, Bill Gates or whatever you remember. They have money, but they don't command the wind, for example. So he didn't stop praying. If you say, I'm very sick, I had terminal illness, then Ayyub alayhi salam is the example. So when you read the Quranic stories, you cannot find any excuse to say, I was ill, I was rich, I was poor, my children left me, or my wife, cheated me. There's no, excuse. Therefore, these stories are really good examples. Especially, some, the Prophet ﷺ, our Prophet, is the perfect man. He has the best example in everything, but other prophets in certain things. Like Yaqub alayhi salam, showing patience to his loss. Ayyub alayhi salam, again, patience. Sulaiman alayhi salam, showing patience against richness. Because Rumi says, don't blame Pharaoh that much. If he had the armies that he had, if he had the treasures that he had, we will see what kind of person you are. When I go to my hometown, I understand my friends' financial position, because some of my friends I didn't see in the last 20 years. I meet them in the bazaar street. From their greeting to me, I understand their financial position. If they say, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? I said, this guy is doing very well. He's very rich. And I ask my friends, they say, yes, he has done 3 shops, 3 branches of his company. If someone's going, oh, my friend, how are you? I say, beware, I am also poor. Don't come close to me. I don't have that much money. Just their greeting and talking, I easily understand their financial position, Alhamdulillah, prophets are not like this. Prophets were always respecting the poor and the rich, and we cannot show any weakness in their character, alhamdulillah. So, with Ustaz Malik Bedri, this project is not mine actually. We started, Ustaz Malik Bedri Rahimahullah started this by himself. Then we made some television programs together with him. And we started with Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, then we went to Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, but his life didn't suffice, unfortunately. Otherwise, we would complete all these prophets, and it would be very beautiful. MashaAllah, Ustaz Malik Bedri was a very hard-working person. Until his last minute, he worked and wrote this book. It's published now in Arabic. Do you have this, brother? Awatif book, The Prophet's Emotions. It is in Arabic, not translated, unfortunately, into English, but it is, I think, being translated into Turkish. So, with Musa alayhi salam, believe me, there is 100 different therapies, And the first thing Ustaz Malik Bedri said, Allah sent also prophets with the best psychology for their times. Musa alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam come from the same origin. One is so soft. He's forgiving everyone. Even his bully brothers tried to kill him, pushed him into a ditch. He said, La tathribu alaykum al-yawm. There is no blame on you today. That's shaitan. But when you look at Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam coming from Mount Sinai and seeing his people worshipping the golden calf, almost was killing Harun, shaking his head and, because he was powerful prophet, Allah sent him as the best example for this kind of people. So in psychology, really, if you're a teacher in certain areas, you should read about the, customs and traditions and psychology of these people. Therefore, for example, marriage in our culture is not advised from different cultures. Why? Because people have different traditions, different attitudes. If I am not mistaken, a Pakistani lady was married to an Egyptian man. They visited Cairo. Any Egyptians? Sorry to say this. And yes, welcome. The wife was in her room, didn't leave the room. He said, why don't you go out? He said, did you stop fighting? She thought these normal talks of Egyptians are like fighting. Because they really, in Arabic world, they are, mashallah, using high pitch of voice. So did you stop fighting? Can I come outside? Also, I have seen Malaysians, mashallah, we are so very soft people. With Turks, they always think we are fighting. When we have dinner, eating and discussing some political things, they are scared. We can kill and stab each other at any moment. You say, don't be scared. We are just, talking normal, this Turkish politics. So Musa alayhi salam was a tough man. When he came back from this, Mount Sinai and burned the golden calf, they didn't do anything against Musa alayhi salam. Whereas they were killing almost Harun alayhi salam when he wanted to stop them. So you see, we should learn about maybe prophets' characters. Also, I find Musa alayhi salam, this, Allah is controlling our fears, teaching us how to control our emotions. We should fear Allah, that is fard. وَلَا تَخَافُوا وَخَافُونِ. Don't be scared of them, only scared of fear me. So, fearing of Allah, you can remind me about the time, I don't have any watch. So I will talk until 27 prophets finish. And we just start with Adam alayhi salam.
We would be happily listening to you.
I am joking, just tell me 2 minutes before, okay? And, Musa alayhi salam was very tough, very strong man. He killed the Egyptian with one fist. But, Allah was teaching him not to fear from a snake. He said, the first thing, ما في يمينك يا موسى قال هي عصاي أتوكل عليها وأوش على غنمي. He started to mention the virtues of the staff. And he said, throw it away, and it became a big dragon, a big snake. And really Musa alayhi salam, with all his courage and bravery, escaped, even without turning back, Allah said, come back, don't be scared. So Allah was training him, gradual desensitization, can we call this? The next time, when he went to Pharaoh and he threw the stick, it became a big dragon. This time he still scared, feared his own stick, but didn't escape that time. So there are so many interesting. Allah is teaching us how to control emotions. There are emotions that we should control them. Fear, which is the basic, emotion of each of us. You shouldn't be feared. You can be feared of snake. That's okay. You can have a therapy, but you cannot be scared of enemy. For example, snake is not that bad dangerous. Enemy is more dangerous. Nowadays they have all kind of guns. When the Beni Israel said, "Oh, Moses, we want garlic, onions, and all this stuff," he said, "Let's go to cities, and they have there, and we take over these cities, inshallah. Then you will have all this stuff." What did he say? "Oh, Musa, there are very tough people there. You and your Lord, go and fight." So fearing the enemy is an haram feeling. You should control this. You should learn about it. I don't know how. Because in Islam, you're allowed to escape from the battlefield. One of the grave sins is turning your back to the enemy if you're not going to another camp to fight. So Musa alayhi salam, especially the story of Khidr, mashallah, this is also very good for psychology people. I wish Musa alayhi salam, as Prophet ﷺ said, he was more patient. We would learn so many things, but he didn't show patience. إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. Khidr is saying, you cannot be patient with me. Because Musa alayhi salam has a little bit, proud of his knowledge. He has done so many miracles. He divided the Red Sea into two. He saved his people. And when his companions asked him, who is the most knowledgeable person on earth? He looked right and left. He said, I think it is me. Then Allah showed him that you are not the most knowledgeable, and he went to accompany the Khidr and learn from him. There's no limit to learning, you know. Even you're a prophet, there are things still you can learn. And interesting here, actually very good therapy for maybe some patients, because someone is losing his son or child, and you will read this story, maybe this son will be your, problem in future, who knows. And when he, damaged the ship, killed the young boy, and built this, wall for the village that they don't give him any food, and later when he explained everything, it really makes very good sense. And of course, in the Holy Quran, Allah says, sometimes you think something is good, it is bad for you. Sometimes something is bad, then it's good for you. So it is teaching us to think in a different way. There are no bad things in the world, in the life. Everything is good. From a Sufi perspective, from Ibn Ajib's perspective, even the calamities are the best things you can come across. Someone is dead, you lost your limb or your money. Ibn Ajib says we are becoming 10 times more when we have some problem in our lives, because they use this negative thing to reach a positive thing. Because these calamities are here for training you, for making you a better Muslim. You lose a beloved one, yes, you should show patience. And as psychologists, we should go deep down, into psycho for patients, as well as in the deep down in psychology of other problems. And we find this in many times in our Sufi books through storytelling. And I want to give the last example from Al-Ghazali. Rumi is really full of, I will advise you to read Rumi from this perspective. And there are some therapy techniques in America. They are using his stories as a therapy for different diseases. Ghazali is like positive thinking. In a desert, a Bedouin family, they had a donkey, a rooster, and what? Third thing. Dog. Yes. One day the donkey was eaten by wolves. All the family were very sad, We were using this donkey to carry water. So what will happen? Who will carry the water now? The father said, don't worry, there is some good in it. He said, Daddy, what can be good in it, We lost the donkey. Who will carry the water? The next day, the rooster died, or the fox ate it. They said, who will wake up? There's no alarm watches or clocks that time. Who will wake up for the prayer? They were very sad. And the third day, the dog also died by itself. Always the father said, there is some good in it, don't worry. And always the family said, what good can be in this? That's, After a few days, the enemy, made a raid, killed the neighboring houses and plundered the camels and everything. But this family, because they didn't have a dog to bark and give a signal to their place, and no rooster, and no donkey, so they were saved. Positive thinking, You can make, this incident might be very saddening for some people, but if you look at it from a different perspective, it can be very good. I thank you very much for listening to me. And also I would like to admit that this is a new field. Please open for cooperation. Any ideas, any suggestions, I am open, Really, it is a very big field. Who are we to talk about prophets in the first place? May Allah forgive me as well. I thank you very much for your listening and patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Professor Süleyman Derin. We would definitely listen to him for another half an hour or a couple of hours. It was a very nice discussion on stories of prophets, and I would also like to thank him for his attention to time. So we have a day-long program, and it's a packed program, so it's better to go on with the first panel without further ado. So I would like to invite Dr. Khalid Zemzemi, Rasha Badr, and Fikriye Bilge Bircan for their talk. Yeah. Yes, so yes, as a good reminder from Ustad Human, For the first panel, we are just here. There is no panel right now. There is no session right now at EDEP. After the first panel, we will have a break. And then after the break, we will have parallel sessions here in İSAR and EDEP at the same time. I will remind this at the end of this session. So please. So the title of the paper of Dr. Khalid, Ustad Rasha and Ustad Bilge is an overview of contemporary efforts to revive classical Islamic works pertinent to the field of psychology. So it's going to be a very good start for this day-long discussion because they are going to bring together a broad perspective. So I'd like to quickly introduce them to you. Dr. Khalid is a psychiatry fellow at the Institute of Living Harvard Healthcare in Connecticut, US. He received his medical degree from Ain Shams University, Egypt, and completed his psychiatry residency at Hamad Medical Corporation in Doha, Qatar. He also completed a master's degree in Islamic studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar. He serves as researcher with the Family and Youth Institute and Khalil Center in the USA. He also serves as a faculty member at the Al-Karam Institute in the US as well. He previously served as a research assistant at Yale University. Dr. Al-Zamzami, his research interests lie at the interface between mental health, culture, spirituality, and religiosity. His particular interests include the integration of religion and spirituality in clinical practice, suicide in the Islamic literature, and Muslim community. Contributions of Muslim intellectuals to psychology and mental health, as well as Islamic ethics in clinical practice. The second member of our respected team is Rasha Badir. She's a public health professional with 10 years of experience as a program manager in tobacco control and another 10 years as an advisor and trainer for several development projects. She holds an MBA from Vanderbilt University and the Global Tobacco Control Certificate from the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. She has recently earned her MA in Applied Islamic Ethics from Hamad bin Khalifa University, where her thesis addressed the ethics of public health interference in individual behavior. She will soon start the PhD program at the Alliance of Civilizations Institute at Ibn Khaldun University. Welcome. And our final speaker is Fikriye Bilge Bircan. She received her BA in psychology from Istanbul University and currently doing integrated PhD in clinical psychology program at Ibn Khaldun University. She is also an ihtisas student at EDEP. And this is a very good example of how our students from İSAR and EDEP are cooperating and working with respected scholars. So we have about 30 minutes for this panel, and it's probably better to have a Q&A at the end of the talk as well. So if we can finish in about 15-20 minutes, inshallah, we will have a Q&A at the end as well. So I would like to leave the floor to you. Thanks a lot for coming again. We are excited to listen to you.
Thank you so much. Maybe 20 to 25 minutes. We'll leave some time.
It's up to you. Sure. Thanks.
And I want to thank you for teaching me how to pronounce Fikriya's full name in Turkish. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Thank you so much to İSAR, Khalil Center, and EDEP for putting together this beautiful symposium. I want to start today's presentation by asking people here, who in the room, if you know this person in the picture, please raise your hand. All right, perfect. So almost everyone in the room raised their hand, and this is Professor Malik Badri. And this is... All right. Can you hear me? Yeah? All right. So this is Professor Malik Badri, and almost everyone in the room raised their hand. Now my second question would be, who knows this person? If you know them, please raise your hand. Dr. Muhammad Uthman Nagati. So I see 3, 4, 5 hands. If you know this person, Dr. Az-Zubair Bashir Taha, please raise your hand. I see 4, 5 hands raised. So contrasting how many people in the room know Dr. Malik Badri versus how many people in the room know the other two people, Did you know that Dr. Malik Badri used to use the books of these two scholars in teaching Islamic psychology when he was teaching Islamic psychology in Malaysia? He wrote in the introduction for one of the books of Dr. Zubair, he said that I used to teach Islamic psychology in Malaysia, and in my classes when we wanted to read classical literature, I used to use the books of Muhammad Uthman Nagati and Dr. Zubair Bashir Taha and so on. And Dr. Zubair Bashir Taha, and correct me if I'm mistaken, is still alive, right? He's on the advisory board of IAIP. Right? All right. The reason I started with this, I'm not surprised to see that so many people in the room are not familiar with Dr. Uthman Nagati or Dr. Zubair Taha, because this is the case with so many people who have been doing Islamic psychology work for many, many years. There are so many names, there are so many gems out there that we are not familiar with, right? So when I first received the invitation to submit an abstract for this symposium, there are so many books I'm very passionate about in the Islamic literature. There are so many scholars I wanted to explore their work further, but what I felt the best thing to do in this symposium would be is to really bring the concept of al-ulama warathatul anbiya, the concept of wiratha. The Prophet ﷺ described knowledge as something that is passed on from one generation to another, something that we inherit from the previous generation, right? And I've seen fragmentation in that chain. That wiratha is almost fragmented, is almost not there. There are so many things that are out there that have been done since 1940s and 30s and 50s that many people who are doing IP work today are not familiar with, right? So rather than reinventing the wheel, I feel like everyone who is passionate about Islamic psychology, they go and read al-Balkhi and they want to write about al-Balkhi. But there are so many things that have been written about al-Balkhi. And then they move on to al-Ghazali, as if there is again, reinventing the wheel process happening for anyone who is passionate about the field. And partly, it's because of how vast the Muslim world is, how many languages these works have been written in, right? So it is natural, it's rather fundamental for anyone who's interested in IP, in Islamic psychology, to explore the intellectual heritage of Muslims, the classical literature, right? And actually, Dr. Nagati, in his book, Introduction to Islamic Psychology, he laid out 7 steps for anyone who wants to establish the field of Islamic psychology. There are 7 steps. And the third step, as you see here, is knowledge of the Muslim intellectual psychological heritage, right? And he said, and that's very, very interesting, he said that the same way Muslim scholars in the past attempted to reconcile Greek traditions with Islamic traditions, we are faced with a similar dilemma today to reconcile Western traditions with the Islamic tradition. So perhaps there is a lot for us to learn from how classical Muslim scholars reconciled the two, right? And he himself did an amazing work of exploring this tradition. He had a book on Ibn Sina, sensory perception in Ibn Sina's work. He has his own monograph on psychological studies of Muslim scholars, and he supervised a 3-volume publication, an encyclopedic publication that was commissioned by IIIT called Psychological Sciences and Islamic Heritage, right? So it's imperative for anyone who is interested in IP to explore the heritage, and there are so many approaches to do that. As Paul Kaplik and Dr. Skinner highlighted, there's the filter approach, there's the Islamic psychology approach, there's the comparison approach. If you want more details, you can read that paper. But not only our approaches can vary, but the Islamic classical tradition in psychology is very diverse as well. Literature comes from philosophical perspectives, from medical perspectives, from theological perspectives. The same way here in the room today, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, Islamic studies scholars, and so on. The same way the classical literature is very, very diverse. So our aim from this presentation was basically to stand on the shoulders of giants, but not the classical giants, rather the contemporary giants who tried to actually explore the classical literature. Our hope was to highlight previous works, some gaps, some limitations, strengths, and also provide scholars who are teaching Islamic psychology with potential reading material for their classes and courses and programs and so on. The questions we wanted to ask of the literature were, what are the modern works examining classical Islamic psychology sources? Who are the major contributors to this literature? What are the classical works or scholars examined? What are the main topics and themes? What are the different approaches, methodologies they used? How did they engage with contemporary psychology is a big question that we had. And what's the quality of the scholarly works that have been done? So our methodology, given that most of the literature that we needed to work with is gray literature, And for anyone who's not familiar with the term gray literature, basically it's literature that you are not going to be able to access through major academic databases, right? If we go on PubMed, for example, in the medical field, or PsycInfo for the psychological literature, you're not going to find most of this work, right? So we wanted to take a non-systemic, perhaps a more liberal approach to finding this literature. So we used a variety of sources. In Arabic, for example, we used different databases such as Manduma, Manhal, Ma'rifa. In Turkish, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these, but Fikriya was able to identify some of the major databases in Turkey. Reference list in Islamic psychology books. So we went through the books and some of the references that they used. Google Scholar, again, using a liberal kind of non-systematic approach. We used online book repositories where so many of the Arabic books can be found. Perhaps شبكة العلوم النفسية العربية has published a lot of works examining the classical literature. And when we use these databases, we use many terms trying to extract all this literature. We used combinations of terms such as Islam, psychology, psychological, classical, turath, ilm, nafs, علم النفس في التراث, so many combinations, but also added some names of scholars, for example, Ghazali, علم نفس, البلخي, علم نفس, الكندي, علم نفس, تراث, and so on. So a lot of combinations, a lot of, just in our attempt to extract as much as we can. And the primary languages we worked with is Arabic, English, and Turkish, and I'm sure there are so many other major contributors to the field in Iran, in Malaysia, and Indonesia that we might not have been able to have access to. Our team members here only spoke these 3 languages. And in terms of inclusion, exclusion, the only thing that we were very particular about was that the paper, the book, explicitly engaged classical literature. So we were not looking for general Islamic psychology, علم النفس الإسلامي. We're looking for works that explicitly explored classical works, classical scholars, and so on, right? And when we started working, a typology started emerging for us. So we started refining our typology, and I put it up here. So on the right side here, you see category A, Islamic psychology works explicitly engaging with classical literature. A1 was high-level overviews. So these are works that explored علم النفس في التراث الإسلامي, like the entirety of the classical Islamic heritage, right? Books that examined so many scholars or so many books at the same time. So these are high-level overviews. This is number 1, A1 category. A2 were books that were theoretical in nature and examined maybe a specific theory, a specific concept, a specific book, a specific school of thought, but from a theoretical perspective. No practical interventions or applications. And A3, category 3, and we'll be using these categories as we go through the lecture. A3 were literature that invoked or focused on practical or applied interventions in any of the practical fields of psychology or subfields of psychology, clinical psychology, positive psychology, health psychology, and so on. Now on the left side, you will see category B is basically any book of Islamic psychology will somewhere use classical works, right? So at some point, we would love to look into these, for example, Dr. Rothman's model, Dr. Homan's TIIP book. All these books use the classical literature in their approaches and their models, but the book itself does not say, I am going to explore classical literature in my book, right? So there is, all these books engage with classical literature, but not very, very explicitly as the focus of the work, right? And then category C, as we were going through the literature, we came across so many papers and books that were of low quality that no one of us will use them, for example, in their research or academic endeavors. So we classified them as C. And in the next portion, we're going to present some of our preliminary findings, and they are basically going to be organized under Arabic literature, English literature, and then Turkish literature, and then we will conclude, inshallah. So I'll pass it on to Ustad Rasha.
Thank you. Yeah, it's okay. So basically, I'll just give you a flavor of what we got when we were looking at the Arabic papers and dissertations. And this category does not include books. So the first phase got like 30 items, of which 2 I think were PhD dissertations. Generally, we had a low quality in terms of scholarship. Although all of those, I guess, with the exception of 2 or 3 items, were labeled as peer-reviewed. So those were in journals that said we're scientific academic journals and we're peer-reviewed. Of the first phase, like 30 items, 9 of which go under category C that Khalid just described. Those papers or those items were excluded for not meeting scholarly criteria. They did not have a specific research objective, could not provide any sense of originality, they did not have a methodology, they were not objective, some were very emotionally charged, trying just to position psychology as the Islamic thing that never ever came after that. And then they did not provide a contribution for further work. Like, where does that take me? What can I build on this? So you've done your paper, so where do I go next with that? With the others that were accepted, we were very charitable in including them. So although we did include them and we will be describing them, I can say they're almost not going to serve any one of us as a source when we're working later on. So while we did accommodate them based on their methodologies, and for example, they're still in need of a lot of work. So for example, the shortcomings that they depict redundancy and repetition. So Khalid was talking about reinventing the wheel. They're just reinventing the wheel. Talking about the conception of Nafs al-Ghazali, talking about conception of Nafs al-Ghazali. And then what? Then where do you go with that? They did not provide recommendations or conclusions that would really inform future research. And although they did try in a way to incorporate modern psychology and traditional works, but they did not really get into a conversation. So it might have happened, it was either absent or it might have just happened by using modern psychology terms to describe traditional works, for example. So to give you an example of what we got, like the themes that we got when we were working on that, the high-level overviews, like 5 papers out of 30, the themes that they looked at, positioning Muslims as pioneers. As I said, many of them were emotionally charged, just trying to say that we are the inventors, we are the originators of that science. Underlining the variability in the conceptions of nafs or the nature of humans, etc. Variability in theories on character formation, behavioral change, etc. The second group, which is those items that consider or examine a specific theory or a class of theories, they looked at the nature and or the health of the nafs. They looked at behavior change, they looked at character change, cultivating morality. So those were the themes in a way that they would go into, or the conception of sa'ada and its relevance to psychological health. The last group, the A3, which are supposedly applied in nature, we got one item, and I'll present it in a bit. And they try to incorporate modern psychological concepts and bring in the classical tradition to inform those applications. So I'll provide 2 examples. I'm not going to provide any examples about the overview because it's just like very general, it doesn't really add much. But if we talk about those that look into theories or specific theory or a class of theories, there's this work of الصحة النفسية عند الإمام الغزالي دراسة نقدية تحليلية, psychological health as conceptualized by Al-Ghazali, a critical analytical study. This work tries to look at the conception of psychological health as presented by Al-Ghazali, Imam Al-Ghazali, and its underlying foundations and premises, which is basically the nature of the nafs. And it does look into the corrective and preventive applications of how Imam Al-Ghazali envisioned them. However, despite the title, you see it's a critical analytical study, the critical or analytical component was overshadowed by just a descriptive component. So the study is mostly descriptive, despite everything that it's conveying in its title. And its comparative component to modern psychology, in a way, was mostly through using the terms. So it didn't really provide a specific comparative component. The other item, which is the only applied item we got, Virtues and Vices Scales from Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali's Thought Psychometric Study. So again, from the title, you can see that someone's trying to build a scale to measure a specific item, which is basically psychological health. And what the author does is that she translates this classification of virtues and vices into measurable indicators of psychological health. The problem, again, is that those do not provide quality studies. So that methodology they're using, transitioning from qualitative into quantitative is a given. They don't explain how that works. They don't explain the choice of indicators that they're using to measure vices or virtues on the practice. And they just provide a transition from the self-reports that people use into an objective measure, but we never see how that is being built into a specific methodology.
Thank you, Rasha. I'm just going to give a very brief on Arabic books. So there was major high-quality academic works under each category: A2, A1, A2, and A3. Some prolific authors such as Dr. Nagati and Zubair Bashir Taha, and some commissioned efforts by the IIIT, the encyclopedia that I highlighted earlier. So this is a 3-volume encyclopedia by IIIT as an example of A1, Ibn Nagati's work on Ibn Sina as an example of A2, and this is a book called Experimental Psychology in the Arabic Islamic Tradition, a huge volume by Dr. Omar Khalifa as an example of A3. I'm going to pass it on to Fikriya to give us some updates on the Turkish literature.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm a bit nervous, so I'm sorry in advance if I'm mistaken. Bismillah. I will present my research experience in the Turkish. Oh. Okay. I will present my research experience in the Turkish literature in the aspect of related to Islamic psychology. First of all, I have found 13 studies in the Turkish literature that met the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And 5 studies out of them are master's or doctoral dissertations conducted by students in the religion of psychology programs at various universities. And the rest is published in peer-reviewed journals. That's why we could evaluate the scholarly quality as good. However, there are limitations to each study, we could say. And studies are conducted by others from theological perspectives and backgrounds with no or few psychological backgrounds. And the date of publication in the included studies starts from 2016 onwards, and this indicates that there is a progressive interest in IP in Turkey. And lastly, more than half of the studies fall into the A3 category of the typology that has presented earlier. After giving a general description of the studies, we could dig into the themes in the Turkish literature according to the presented typology. As you may remember, the first category was A1, which includes studies that offer an overview. There are 2 studies out of 13 which fall into this category. One study gives high overview of certain Muslim psychologists who lived between 18 and 1406. And the other generally examines the concept of akal, ruh, and nafs according to differently scholarly views. And the second category is reviewing a concept or works of a specific scholar in detail. There are 4 studies in this category. One study examines comparatively the concept of happiness according to the views of some scholars such as Ghazali, Ibn Sina, and Abu Bakr al-Razi. The other study makes a comparison between the concept of nafs in Ibn Sina's work and ego concepts in modern psychology. And the other study examines the topics of psychology in Al-Kindi's books in detail. The last study compares 2 psychological works, copyright and translation, from the late Ottoman period. For the last category that I have in my part, it is A3, which is introducing applied interventions. And there are 7 studies in this category. 3 studies compare CBT techniques with interventions in Abu Zayd al-Balkhi's book named Masalih al-Abdan wal-Anfus. It can be said that there is an international interest in Abu Zayd al-Balkhi's work, like Ustaz mentioned. Interestingly, a scholar who lived in 9th century can gain popularity after 12 centuries. That shows us actually the ilm's power. And the other 3 studies are about the concept of virtues, akhlaq, and character development, according to Jahiz, Taşköprüzade, and other group of scholars. We can say that also in Turkey there is a growing interest in these concepts of akıl, akhlaq, virtue, and character development. And the last study compares mystic psychology and positive psychology with Ibn Hazm's views about happiness, self-purification, and virtues, human characteristics. I found these articles and themes in my research experience. Finally, I might add at that themes in classical Islamic works are often compared with modern psychology in Turkish literature, but the depth of comparison change from study to study. Some of them, unfortunately, are superficial. And lastly, it's possible to say most studies are theoretical, descriptive, and comparative with very few applicable interventions. This was my part. Thank you for much listening. I will give the word to
Thank you so much. I'm going to skip over the English literature just to give some conclusion remarks here. So there have been some encyclopedic works by individuals and by organizations, but there's a lack of engagement or feedback or utilization of some of these works, perhaps. Some repetitive works, redundancy in different languages, same languages, considerable attention to specific works such as Al-Balkhi. There's contrasting with contemporary psychology, but with various approaches and natures and so on. Very few applications, interventions, applied subfields, and some recommendations for the future, just improving the awareness amongst IP workers about these sources and their utility. Applications, Dr. Amber Haq said, we don't want more championing of the classical literature, but rather developing more practical applications. Encouraging translation of these texts. Dr. Malik Badri, in his introduction to one of the books, said we need to translate all these texts to different languages. We need cross-national collaborations, journals, conferences on specific themes such as this one, and incorporating some of these readings into IP programs. And that's our presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much for this great presentation, and I really appreciate. Like, that was very helpful for me, especially for a field. Okay, especially for a field that is new, like this one. A bird eye view is quite important, and I think this work will help for the works that will come after this point as well. So at this point, we have about 7-8 minutes for the Q&A. I would like to open the floor for questions, and then hopefully we will get the answers. Please. And if you can introduce yourself, that will be helpful as well. We have a mic over there. We need the mic for the camera.
Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Taha from Canada. I'm very happy to be here. I really like this presentation. My question was for Fikriya about the Turkish sources. There was listed a couple databases. Are any of the Turkish sources from like more than, say, 100 years ago when Turkish was actually written in Arabic script?
You mean like reviving the classical Islamic works in Ottoman period like that, or?
Because you mentioned something about Ottoman, so I was just wondering.
Yeah. Actually, there is a book named İlmi Ruh. We could say there is like modern psychological, like biological concepts, and also the concepts we could see in classical Islamic literature. Too. There is some works we could say, and there are also like reviving works today of these works, written in Ottoman period.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just curious as to how accessible the old literature is, since people don't learn it in school anymore.
Yeah.
I would guess that the literature talking about will be the classical literature. Okay. And we are going to look at contemporary works. We are looking at contemporary. So any book that's more than 100 years old will be almost from the classical literature. Any book from the Ottoman period will be almost from the classical period that we are going to be examining today to examine relevance to contemporary psychology. Does this make sense?
Okay, so this was not your focus as the...
No, I mean, if we were able to, if we found any contemporary works examining any Ottoman works, would be included in our data, if this makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Does this, yeah?
We have another question there, and then we'll come here.
Assalamu alaikum. أنا Dr. Muhammad Abu Hilal. I'm a psychiatrist, Syrian psychiatrist working with Syrian refugees and Syrian inside Syria. So thank you very much, Dr. Khalid and your colleagues, about this work. I have a question. Did you find any article or book talking as a critic of Islamic psychology? First. Second, any work regarding sociology of science or philosophy of science that apply to Islamic psychology? So I have these two questions. Thank you.
So books that are critical of the movement of Islamic psychology are there, but they are beyond the scope of our specific topic. Like I am familiar with some scholars in the Muslim world who have criticized the Islamization movement and Islamat ilm al-nafs and all these movements, but this is not part of what we are looking for here. We're looking at contemporary scholars who examined classical psychological literature in particular, right? And I did not come across anything in the second category that you asked about.
Yes, please.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Sayyid Jamal Miri. I want to thank Dr. Khaled, Ustad Arasha, and Ustad Fikriya for a great presentation, and Ustad Tahir for a great moderation. I work a lot internationally, and I see a lot of resources in Indonesia, Malaysia, Iran, South Africa, and many others. And I would love to help you guys with those connections and those resources, because I think it's so important to add beyond the scope of only literature in English or I love English, by the way, and I love Arabic and Turkish. But instead of saying like that, let me reframe myself. I love English, Arabic, and Turkish. Let's add more. I'm a Sunni Iranian myself, and in Iran there is a lot of resources in Islamic psychology, and I feel like we need to engage with Iran. Even though we have some differences, we're still engaging with Western psychology, so why not with Iranians who are actually Muslims, even though they might have a different approach in certain Aqidah questions or fiqh questions. We have still a lot in common. Malaysia, of course, Professor Bedri was there. In Indonesia, I have had the honor through ISIP, which I'm active in, to engage with so many Indonesian scholars, and they're really like one of the forefronts in the field, you know. So just signing up to be part of this work, inshallah, and to add these resources. And thank you for amazing work.
I've been a big fan of the work you're doing, let's say Jamaluddin, and I again, as I said earlier, we want to bridge that international fragmentation that's existing in the IP movement today. So I'd love to collaborate, inshallah.
Yeah, building bridges is hopefully going to be one of the best outcomes of these kind of works. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair for that very interesting presentation. I have two questions. First one, I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you theorize why there's a trend to skip modern scholarship and go straight to the classical sources? And be kind in that answer, as there's quite a few of us who are presenting on Ghazali and Al-Balkhi today. And the second question is something I've always been interested in, and I feel there's a big gap in Islamic psychology in terms of experimentation. So I see a lot of theories being put out, but I don't see a lot of scientific experimentation being carried out. Is that something you came across at all in your systematic reviews? Jazakumullah khair.
So the first question is a tough one, because it really, I don't know if it reflects just our approach to, I don't want to be very critical here, but many of us have our own ideas and our own theories and our own models and so on, and we don't have, many of us only speak one language or two languages, right? Sometimes we become too consumed in developing our own theories further and our own ideas further and so on. There are no programs that taught Islamic psychology 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, right? So we are all working in silos, and we don't have access to all this literature. As I said, most of it is gray literature, right? So most of the people who are really passionate about the work might not have access to it, even if they tried, right? So it's a mix of maybe lack of access, lack of resources, language barriers, perhaps maybe some more effort that's needed from our side, right? Before trying to do wiratha first, take some ijaza first before advancing knowledge further. But again, there are limited places where people can do that, right? Now, in terms of experimentation, there have in most of the papers that we've examined so far, I don't know if in Turkish literature, but most of them are presenting ideas and theories and models, but none of them have been, no experimental approaches as far as we found so far. Yeah.
Let's have one last question from the back, and then.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Misbah Rafiq. I'm from India, and I have recently done my PhD in Islamic psychology. So I was wondering that when we are talking about that the literature, the classical literature, and from various sources, but is there an underlying research methodology that we are going that we are uniformly going to use in Islamic psychology, which will be viable for us and for the further development of the discipline? Because if this is just a translation work, or it is a work wherein we are doing the comparisons, but if we go a step ahead and try to build our methodology so that there is uniformity, that's my one question. And if I'm allowed to comment on the previous question about that why not modern scholarship, I think that classical scholarship gets attention because it is way more comprehensive in terms of the like when we refer to the classical scholars as polymaths and people who had that comprehensive knowledge. So maybe that's one of the that's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Usma. That's a very, very good question. And so I put up here the 7 steps proposed by Dr. Nagati for the advancement of the field of Islamic psychology. And you see here, number 1 is mastery of modern psychology. Number 2 is mastery of the Islamic tradition. Number 3 is knowledge of the Muslim intellectual heritage. Number 4 is critique of modern psychology. Number 5 is conducting Islamically oriented empirical research studies. Number 6 is organizing academic conferences and seminars such as this one. And number 6. Number 7, rewriting psychology within the Islamic framework, right? So as you see here, the question you asked is step number 5 here in Dr. Nagati's approach. And all the experts here in Islamic psychology in the field, we need to adopt a model like this. We need to make sure that we are going through all these phases, right? We need to make sure that we are doing the studies, right? And I know there are some outcome studies that Khalil Center is currently doing and other people as well. So we are not just stuck with a translation piece and just trying to explore the tradition, but as a collective effort here, all of us need to be engaged in all these 7 steps, right? But without, what we are trying to do today is, what do we have in number 3? And let's make it accessible, let's make people aware of it, so that they can take it and move on in the cycle forward, if that makes sense, yeah.
Um,
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
yes, please, and yeah.
Yeah, my understanding from Dr. Nagati's work is that this is his journey as well. He feels that we need to be well established in the modern field first. Not first, but we need that establishment in modern psychology to be able to bring in Islam and then provide a new vision for the field of psychology. Order-wise, he said that many of these steps will be overlapping, yeah. But he himself did his PhD on Ibn Sina, and then he went to Yale, he did his master's, his PhD, so he was doing both simultaneously as well. So he saw them as overlapping, naturally overlapping, but also there's some kind of merit to some of the steps here, the order of the steps here.
Thank you all, and I particularly like to appreciate for Dr. Khalid, Ustad Rasha, and Ustad Fikriya for this great talk and for very helpful questions as well. Now we are going to have our first break, and we are a bit behind of the schedule, so let's have a 15-minute break, and then let's convene back at 11:45. So just a quick reminder. After this one, our sessions will be parallel sessions. So one of the sessions will be here, and the other session will be at EDEP, just 1 minute walk from down the street. So you can check the program, and you can pick whichever panel you would like to listen. And we have some snacks and refreshments outside. So let's have some fresh air, and then let's convene back at 11:45, either here or EDEP. Thank you very much.